In the years since the tragedy of 9/11, there have been many accounts of the heroism, sacrifice and loss experienced by the people in the towers that day. But one story of 9/11 has remained hidden until now, a story that is almost beyond belief. When United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower, it hit floors 78 to 84, traveling at 540 miles an hour. And yet, 18 people on those very floors made it out alive. This is their story.
I'm looking towards the direction of the Statue of Liberty, and something caught my eyes. First small, and by the milliseconds it's getting larger and larger and larger and larger. The plane is bearing down on me, eye-level eye contact, and I dove under the desk. And the next thing I know, the plane just slammed into the building.
Oh my God!
The impact ignited over 9,000 gallons of jet fuel. That anyone could even survive this inferno is miraculous. But how they escaped before the tower collapsed is just as extraordinary.
I'm trapped. I can't move. There's a fire in here, and already I can't breathe. Then something came over me that said, Alan, don't give up. Whatever you do, don't give up.
Those that survived remained haunted by their memories.
This was the watch that I was wearing. The time stopped on the watch when the Tower 2 came down in 9:59. I went to war and I didn't ask to.
Now, those who were there recall the life and death struggle that took place inside the tower and reveal how they got away. Until 9/11, there was nothing particularly special about the 84th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center, except perhaps to the 250 people who worked there for international brokerage firm Eurobrokers. Here in this competitive, macho environment, close bonds of friendship were formed amongst the traders. In 2001, Brian Clark was an executive vice president and the company's longest-serving employee.
It was high-powered, it was high-pressured, but the people that were involved in the business thrived on it. Most people were at the office for at least 10 hours a day. Well, that's a big chunk of your life. We spent more time with our work associates than we did with our families, perhaps.
Among the brokers was father of four Ron DiFrancesco, who'd moved his family to New York from Toronto just a year before 9/11.
Most people are in by 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and you're sitting almost on each other's laps, right? You're just packed in there. And there's the constant bantering with people and the yelling and screaming. You know, you have to have thick skin. But it was a great group of people, really.
But all this would be torn apart on 9/11. It was 8:46 a.m. when American Airlines Flight 11 hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center, and the eyes of the world were soon fixed on the unfolding drama. But because of the geography of the buildings, the majority of those working on the far side of the South Tower had no idea what had happened. Brian Clark had been in his office on the 84th floor when the first plane hit.
There was this loud boom boom, like a double explosion, and the lights above me kind of buzzed a bit, and suddenly my peripheral vision caught something behind. I whirled around, and 84 floors in the air, swirling flames all over the glass.
Broker Ron DiFrancesco was in the trading room, on the opposite side of the 84th floor.
We were sitting at our desks and then heard this loud noise. And then we saw this flash of light to the side of us, and then some people from the far end of the trading room screamed and just said, "Holy, did you see that?" Nobody knew exactly what was going on, so a pile of people ran over towards the windows and saw what had happened. It was pretty horrible. It was a big gaping hole in the building, and you could see people's faces in the windows. You know, people pleading, like looking for help.
In the North Tower, the impact had destroyed all elevator shafts and stairways on and above the 92nd floor, making any escape for those trapped impossible. Nobody in and above the impact zone would survive. It would be another 16 minutes until the second plane hit the South Tower, and although they couldn't know it, what those in the South Tower did in that brief period of time would mean the difference between life and death. In the Eurobroker's office, many people began to evacuate.
People just said, "I'm getting out of here. Who knows what's going to happen to that tower? Is that tower going to fall against our tower?" You know, people were making up things in their own mind that were all possibilities, and they just said, "Forget it, I'm leaving."
But some decided to stay.
There were a number of brokers who were, whether they were macho or not, I don't know, but they were saying, the damage is next door. We're okay. Where are you going? Business is busy because this is affecting the market. I don't know what was their thought process was, but we were not making them leave.
3 floors below Brian, on the 81st floor, was Stanley Premnath, Assistant Vice President at Fuji Bank. After seeing fireballs outside his corner window, he decided to leave. He'd taken a local elevator down to what was known as the Sky Lobby on the 78th, from where express elevators ran to the ground floor. Also waiting there were some of the company's top executives.
These are the big shots, head of human resources and the general manager and the CEO and everybody else. They're standing there. Not a word is said. Up to this point, I didn't know that a plane had hit the first building. If these guys had known, I don't have a clue. The doors open up, and we just walked in like robots in the elevator. The doors are closed. Less than 1 minute, we're back at the lobby level.
But at 8:49, just 3 minutes after the North Tower was hit, an official in the South Tower made a fateful broadcast to all those inside.
The strobe lights flashed, and the siren gave a little whoop whoop, and the man's voice very emphatically said, "Building 2 is secure. There is no need to evacuate Building 2. If you're in the midst of evacuation, you may use the re-entry doors and the elevators to return to your office. Repeat, Building 2 is secure," and he went through the whole story again. Well, there's this sort of feeling like, relax a bit, we're okay.
As people began to return to their offices, Stanley Premnath stepped out of the elevator, seconds from freedom.
Like about 8 feet from the door, there's turnstiles. So I got out there, and I'm about to go to the turnstile, and the security guard looks at me and says, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going home because I saw fireballs coming down from the first building. Something is happening there." At this point, I can hear the intercom system, the PA system. "Your building is secured. Please go back to your office. Your building is safe. It's secure. Go back to your office." The guy said, "The building is secured. It's safe. Go back to your office."
With his bosses still waiting in the lift behind him, Stanley headed reluctantly back to work. In a few moments' time, he'd be back at his desk on the 81st floor, right at the heart of what was about to become the second impact zone. Within minutes of the first plane hitting the North Tower of the World Trade Center, there was confusion in the South Tower next door as people decided whether to stay or leave. But some were left in no doubt when they looked out of their windows. Because on and above the 92nd floor of the North Tower, over 1,300 people were trapped in their offices, and as the heat and smoke became ever more intense, some took the only way out. It was a terrible sight for those watching from the street. But for those closer, high up in the South Tower, it was even worse.
Well, you saw people in the windows, right? Knowing they were trapped up there. It was difficult. It's not like you were looking them right in the eyes, but you could see those people there. And when you'd see the people jumping, you know, that's their only way out. That was frightening.
It was a pretty horrific thing to witness. You just got to imagine what these people were going through. You know, it's either you stay, you die, you jump, you die.
There was a man and a woman holding hands, and I could just see them just disappearing in front of me, knowing that in another 2 or 3 seconds these people are going to die. That's a vivid memory and something I will never forget.
After watching from a window in the Euro broker's office on the 84th floor of the South Tower, broker Ron DiFrancesco had seen enough and returned to his desk in the trading room.
At that point, it was panic mode for me. You know, I called my wife and I said, it looks ugly there. I said, a lot of people are leaving. I think I might leave soon. I'll call you when I get downstairs.
Just 4 minutes after the first impact, the emergency services had arrived on the scene, and fire chiefs quickly set up a command post in the North Tower. By 8:57, they'd issued instructions to evacuate the South Tower, but it wasn't until 9:02 that message was broadcast over the public address system. At Euro Brokers on the 84th floor, IT manager Richard Fern heard the broadcast and decided it was time to go.
Probably about this time, I started feeling really uncomfortable being up there. And I was passing the elevators, and I said to myself, should I take the elevators or should I take the stairs? I was like, well, we're on the 84th floor. I was like, I really don't feel like walking down 84 stories, and especially if the elevators are working. Pressed the button and the down button, and to my surprise, it lit up. So I decided to take the elevator down.
Terrified after seeing people jumping, father of 2 Alan Mann made his way down from the 105th floor to the sky lobby on the 78th, where he now joined over 200 people waiting for the express elevators that would take them to the ground floor.
I wanted to be out of the building as fast as I possibly could. And I can see out of the corner of my eye that one of the elevators is packed, but it's open. And I just sort of navigate through a series of people, the crowd, and I'm the last guy into that elevator, and I squeeze into the elevator, and the doors immediately close. And at that point, I thought to myself, I made it out, I'm safe, I'm going to get out of the building now.
Meanwhile, Stanley Prainnath had just returned to his desk on the 81st floor after being sent back up by a security guard.
Looking nowhere in particular, I happened to raise my head. I'm looking towards the direction of the Statue of Liberty, and something caught my eyes. First small, and by the milliseconds it's getting larger and larger and larger and larger, and I can hear that sound of that revving engine as this plane gets closer and closer, grey in color. You on the tail, and the plane is bearing down on me. I level eye contact. And as the plane is getting closer, I can hear that revving sound. And all I remember doing as the plane got closer, I dropped the phone, screamed and said, Lord, I can't do this, you take over. And I dove under the desk. And the next thing I know, the most earth-shattering sound, the most booming, thunderous sound I can hear, the plane just slammed into the building.
It was 9:03 a.m. United Airlines Flight 175 had hit the South Tower of the World Trade Center, traveling at 540 miles an hour, igniting over 9,000 gallons of jet fuel. Hundreds were killed instantly as the huge explosion ripped through the building. The impact zone stretched across 7 floors, from the sky lobby on the 78th up to the Euro Brokers offices on the 84th.
And in a split second, our room just fell apart. everything rained out of the ceiling, and we protected ourselves as best we could as things fell down on us. And then the sensation was that our building just moved one way, just kept going. 6 to 8 feet was the feeling. It stopped, and then very slowly for 5 seconds came back to vertical.
The right-hand wing of the plane had sliced through the trading floor, killing the brokers who'd stayed at their desks. Ron DeFrancesco had decided to leave just seconds earlier.
As we were leaving the trading room, there was this big explosion. We got knocked flying, and then all the ceiling tiles came down on us, and just a lot of dust and dirt. Now I know it took out the trading room, so I was probably 30 seconds from death. I didn't know it was a plane, but the whole world was watching as that plane flew in. And my wife was watching on TV, and she had called the school and told them to not let the children watch the TV because their father was in there. And of course they did watch it, right? The whole world was watching.
Richard Fern had just stepped into an elevator when the plane hit.
The force of the plane going into the building, and I just got knocked off my feet. I hit my head into the left on the wall, and I just ended up going down on all four, on my hands and my knees. And it was kind of looking straight out at the elevator doors, and I just saw the flames just come up around the doors, and the feeling of the building going over with the momentum of the plane. And I remember it going over and over, and then it just started to settle back. And then as soon as it came back, the only thing I could think was, I have to get out of here. And all I can remember was jumping up and running out.
It was a narrow escape. The impact had sent debris and fireballs shooting through the building's elevator shafts, severing cables and causing lifts to freefall. Alan Mann had just squeezed into an elevator on the 78th floor when the wing of the plane scythed through the sky lobby, instantly killing most of the 200 people waiting there. On impact, his lift began to plummet.
Somebody screamed, "Get on your knees, get on your knees," as we were screaming down, and everybody did. It's the most frightening, panicky, awful feeling of anxiety and anticipation. And all I could think about was, when this stops finally, something's going to come on top of us and crush us. And I was really, really worried about being crushed.
It was only as the elevator neared the ground that the emergency brakes finally engaged, not a second too soon.
Felt like it took an eternity for the elevator to stop. When it finally stopped, the elevator was totally destroyed. People were twisted in between each other, within debris, and I was trapped in the back of the elevator in the fetal position, with the top of the elevator had actually come down and sort of trapped me in the back of the elevator.
Meanwhile, on the 81st floor, Stanley Prainnath was the only person still alive. The Fuji Bank offices were at the very heart of the impact zone.
It looks like a demolition crew came and just ripped this building apart. The floor above me collapsed. I'm hiding under the desk. The only desk that stood firm is the desk I'm hiding under. Everything else looks like matchsticks. Every wall was knocked down. All these cables are short-circuiting. You can see the blue sparks. The air pressure was so great, it's sucking everything out. A large part of the plane, somehow or the other, is wedged in the office doorway about 20 feet from where I am. And I didn't know the plane blew up. If this plane doesn't blow up and kill me, well, then I'm going to get sucked out. And if the two of them miss me, well, then the floor above me is going to collapse totally. I'm going to crush to death. And if the three of them miss me, well, then I'm going to get electrocuted. I'll die here.
Back on the 84th floor, the Euro broker's office was in darkness. After leaping from the burning elevator, father of three Richard Fern found the doorway to one of the three exit stairways. Stairway A.
I put my hands on the door to make sure the door was at least not hot or fire on the other side of the door, and I was able to open the door. I looked in. The stairway was smoky and it was dark, but it wasn't bad enough that you wouldn't go down.
Richard was in luck. Being the furthest from the impact, Stairway A was the only one of the building's three stairways to survive intact.
A lot of things that happened to me that day, it was almost like the hand of God was there. Got me out of the elevator, and then he says, okay, come this way now. All right, go down the staircase. You know, that staircase was only open for a couple of minutes. That staircase filled up, we learned later, filled up with smoke and flames where it wasn't passable after.
Entering the stairway, Richard began the long journey down.
All I knew was I had to get out for my family.
On the 81st floor, Stanley Premnath was bruised, bloodied, and covered in dust. And he was desperate to get out.
I felt like a trapped animal. I don't know where to go. My aim is to live. My ultimate goal is to go home. I don't want to die in here. And I started to crawl as fast as I could. I crawled the entire length of the loans department to the lounge and the computer room and the communication room. And that's the farthest I could have gotten. And as I'm going, I had a piece of wood, I'm breaking everything that I can, and I'm banging on every wall. And I got to this one wall that stood firm, and I'm screaming, Lord, I don't want to die. Please, Lord, send somebody, anybody to help me.
Down below, firefighters had already started climbing the stairways in search of survivors. But they'd never make it as far as the 81st floor. Any rescues in the impact zone would have to come from within. By 9:05 a.m. on September the 11th, 2001, the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center were in flames. On the 84th floor of the South Tower, at the highest point of the impact zone, Eurobroker's executive Brian Clark had gathered together a small group of survivors. In the darkness, they found the only accessible stairway, Stairway A, and began their descent. They had no idea that in less than an hour, the South Tower would collapse. Any delays could prove disastrous.
We only went down 3 floors when we got stopped right at the 81st floor landing by a heavy-set woman coming up the stairs. And she said, you can't go down, stop, no, you can't move. We, referring to her co-worker, have just come off a floor in flames, and there's smoke, and we've got to go higher. No, you can't go down, and it just blocked us.
As the group debated whether to head up or down, Brian heard a man's voice calling for help.
I just instinctively grabbed the person by the shoulder, the person beside me by the shoulder, and I said, come on, Ron. He was a co-worker of mine, Ron DiFrancesco. We got to help this guy. We got to get this guy.
Unaware that Stairway A was passable below them, the rest of the group headed back up towards the roof. But Brian and Ron made their way towards the voice.
The fire escape door right there was locked, but the explosion had blown it off the drywall, and we were able to push the drywall back and squeeze sideways through that gap. Pretty thick smoke swirling on 81, and we worked our way toward this stranger's voice, who was probably 15 yards away, is my estimation, how far away he was.
And as I'm banging on the wall, the man says, I can hear you. He said, well, now you climb over, I'll catch you on the other side. I can't do it. I'm black and blue, I'm swollen, I'm stuck on with pulverized cement. I can't do it.
Overcome by smoke, Ron DiFrancesco was forced back, leaving Brian alone with Stanley.
And I said, the only way out of there is for you to come up this wall and over. And he jumped once, and I tried to grab him. I missed him, and I said, you must do this. And he came up a second time, and somehow I hooked under his arm or something. I heaved him up.
And he pulled, and I squirmed, and I flew over on the other side. And I knocked that man over his feet. And together we rolled, and when we landed, I landed on top of him. And I don't know how to thank a man who just saved my life. I reached down, grabbed this man, and I gave him a kiss on the cheek, and he said, what are you doing? And he got up, all composed, pulling his jacket, his sleeve, and he said, Brian Clark.
We shook hands. He said, I'm Stanley. He said, we'll be brothers for life. I said, well, you know, I don't have any brothers. I don't have any siblings. I said, you can be my brother. And I noticed at that time I had a puncture wound here in my right palm. He had a puncture wound on his left palm. And I'm the one who did it, and I don't know why I did it in this day and age, but nonetheless, I'm the one who did it and said, in fact, we'll be blood brothers for life. Now, come on, let's go home.
Brian started to help Stanley down the stairs. They had a long way to go. 81 floors down, father of two, Alan Mann, was trapped after the elevator he was in had plummeted from the 78th floor to the lobby, killing around 30 of those inside.
I don't know how I did it, but I started to twist and contort my body in such a way where I was able to free my legs. So as I got myself free, I'm literally walking over people that were dead. I get to the front of the elevator, and now there's flames literally coming up and hitting me in the back of the head. And it was at that point that I felt like I was going to die for the first time. And I'm thinking to myself, Alan Mann, 36 years old, the luckiest guy in the world, never had a nick, a cut, or a bruise in his life, is going to die here in the worst possible way, and that my wife is going to be a single mother to my two daughters. And I just couldn't believe it. Then something came over me. Something came into my head that said, Alan, don't give up. Whatever you do, don't give up. And as that came into my head, I looked to the right, and there were two guys who I didn't know were pushing on what was once the elevator door. And I went over there to help them, and I was pushing on the door as people are screaming behind me, and people are literally dying next to me. And as I'm doing that, I look down and I can see a opening below my feet, and I jumped down there and I opened up a door below me. It was actually the elevator doors to the floor below me, and I was able to open it up enough where I stuck my head out of this, you know, small little space about this much, and I got my head out, and now I can breathe.
After helping a woman out before him, Alan squeezed through the hole. Now free, he went to look for help for those he'd left behind. Meanwhile, back in Stairway A, Ron DeFrancesco had caught up with the rest of the group heading towards the roof.
We were trying every exit and got to about the 91st floor and realized that we couldn't get out.
All the exit doors leading from the stairway were locked, so Ron and the group began to head back down. Below them, in the impact zone, the fire was taking hold, and conditions above were deteriorating rapidly.
The smoke was getting quite heavy and thick, so people were sitting on the stairs and trying to get below the smoke. I think they were being overcome by the carbon monoxide and started to fade in and out of consciousness. Everybody was panicked. And, you know, I hope and I think a lot of them had gone to sleep before the building came down. I wouldn't want to be stuck up there and panicked, right?
Having started his descent sooner than Ron, Richard Fern had narrowly avoided the worsening conditions. Below the impact zone, the emergency lighting was working, but it still took him close to 30 minutes to get down.
As you start going down, the adrenaline is starting to wear off. As you're getting down to the lower floors, your legs are turning to rubber. You're going to see, you start decreasing its speed. And also, while you're getting down closer, you say, it's 20th floor. I think I can do this. I think I can make it.
As Eurobroker's IT manager, it was usual for Richard to carry a two-way radio, and as he descended, he was able to listen into conversations his colleagues were having. From somewhere in the impact zone, Eurobroker's communications technician, David Vera, began making urgent calls for help.
It became apparent to me as I was going down the stairs that they were trying to set up a rescue. Just listening, Jerry, who was downstairs, Jerry Banks, who was our security person, he was talking to Dave Vera, who was still up on the floor. And Dave was telling him that there was hurt, people were hurt up here, there was smoke condition up here, that they need help.
The first to respond was Eurobroker's facilities manager, Jose Marrero. He'd already helped several people down as far as the 23rd floor, but when he heard David's message, he turned and headed back up towards the impact zone. On the way, he passed Brian and Stanley.
Jose was about 32 years old, physically fit, brilliant smile, well-known, loved by everybody. He was carrying a walkie-talkie, climbing up the stairs. I said, "Jose, where are you going? What are you doing?" He said, "I can hear Dave Vera up above. He's helping people, and I'm going to help him." I said, "Well, I'm getting this fella from Fuji Bank out." And he said, "I'll be okay." I said, "All right." And Stanley and I continued on down the stairs, and up the stairs Jose went on his way to help Dave Vera and anybody else that was up above. He was that kind of guy, and that's the last I saw of Jose.
On the stairway above the burning impact zone, Ron DiFrancesco was slowly being overcome by the smoke. But as he joined his colleagues laying down on the stairs, he had a profound experience.
It was difficult. I was ready to go, I guess, but somebody called me, and so I followed. Whether you believe in an angel or a God or a spirit, somebody called me and led me towards the fire, right? And I went and I saw a little hole, and I pulled back some drywall and saw the stairwell, and I slid down some drywall, and then I ran through 3 flights of stairs that were on fire.
Ron was badly burned as he ran through the fire. Once he got through it, he began the long journey down over 70 flights of stairs. But he was running out of time. At around 9:40 a.m., Eurobroker's IT manager Richard Fern made it out of the South Tower. Desperate to find a phone to call his wife, Richard stopped at his barber shop. It was only there, in such normal surroundings, that the full magnitude of what had happened finally hit him.
I remember going into the Antonella's, the barber shop, and as soon as I opened the door, she saw me and she just grabbed me. She hugged me, she took me, and she put me in a chair. And she just saw what a mess I was, and she had the other guys come over to me, and they just started wetting me down with towels and just wiping me down.
It was about 10 minutes after Richard that Eurobroker's executive Brian Clark made it out of the building, still supporting the man he'd rescued, Stanley Praimnath. As they made their way through the streets of Manhattan, Stanley glanced back at the South Tower and told Brian he thought it might fall.
And I said, "There's no way. That's a steel structure. That's carpets and furniture." And I really didn't finish my sentence. It was like we were invited to watch.
And the building starts vibrating, shaking sort of. And the next thing we know, like pancake effect, the building starts to implode. Boom, 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 boom. And all hell broke loose.
It was 9:59 a.m. when the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed. 500,000 tons of concrete and steel crashed to the ground, creating a giant dust cloud that quickly enveloped everything in its path. When the South Tower collapsed, Richard Fern had just left his barbershop and was heading towards the Brooklyn Bridge. Within seconds, he was caught up in a crowd running from the dust cloud.
And at that time, I didn't know what to do. I knew I didn't have the legs to make it to the Brooklyn Bridge. I decided to run, maybe it was 20 yards to Pace University, the entrance doors. The security guard was yelling, "This way, come in, come in." I was the last person that they let in. He shut the door behind me. There was people behind me. And you just saw this plume of cloud of dust and debris just went up against the glass.
Once inside, Richard heard a voice over his walkie-talkie. It was Jerry Banks, the Eurobroker's security officer. Outside, amidst the settling dust, Jerry was trying to contact his colleagues, Jose Marrero and David Vera, who had been somewhere in the tower.
And Jerry was just pleading. And he was just calling, "Jose, where are you, Dave? Like, please answer me." And there was nobody answering him. And I guess I was the only one who had a radio who was left. I told Jerry, "Jerry, just go home. Just go home, Jerry. Just get away from here." And he said, "Okay, Mr. Fern." And that was the only time I used the radio.
Around 600 people died in the South Tower. But one man who fled from the impact zone would be found alive in the rubble. And his survival story is the most extraordinary of all. Of all the stories of escape from the impact zone of the South Tower, the most remarkable of all was Ron DeFrancesco's. Having missed the initial impact by seconds, climbing to the 91st floor, then running down through 3 flights of burning stairway, Ron finally made it to ground level.
As I looked out there, you could just hear the noise, right? The big thud, and people jumping, and there were bodies all over, and debris, and it was a war zone.
With people still jumping from the North Tower above, a security guard directed Ron to a safer exit on the floor below, where he met one of his Eurobroker's colleagues.
As we were walking, we heard this loud noise, and I looked to the right and just saw this fireball coming at us, this huge fireball through this channel, through a walkway, and I just yelled, "Run." And I woke up 3 days later in the hospital.
As the South Tower collapsed, Ron was blasted away from the building. His colleague didn't make it. Ron was the last man out alive.
Sorry. They said I had burns on 60% of my body. I had a broken bone in my back. I had a laceration to the head, and my contacts were melted in my eyes. This was the watch that I was wearing. The time stopped on the watch when the Tower 2 came down at 9:59.
It would be another 29 minutes until the North Tower fell, killing over 1,300 people trapped above the impact zone. By the end of the day, the death toll in both towers had risen to almost 2,800. For Ron DeFrancesco, it has been a long road to recovery. Less than a year after 9/11, he and his family returned to Toronto. New York held too many bad memories.
My kids would sit by the window wondering every day if I was coming home. So my wife and I decided that we would depart New York and go back to Canada.
Today he's come back to see the skyline once dominated by the Twin Towers. He still bears the scars from his ordeal.
The physical, I don't have a problem with. It's a reminder of how fortunate I am. I will for life struggle with survivor's guilt. Why me, right? Some people will say, oh, you did the right thing. I didn't do anything. I was lucky, right? So I'll take that with me. I'll take not going back to help those people with me to my grave, but, I'm here now, and every day's a blessing, a bonus, I guess.
Ron was one of only 18 people in and above the impact zone in the South Tower to have escaped with his life. Each has been affected differently by their experience. Richard Fern still works in Manhattan. Like many of those who survived, he now lives for the simple things in life.
I don't know why I made it out. I'm grateful for it. I'm glad that I'm here. I'm thankful that I can get up every morning. I'm thankful that I have a job to go to. Now when I'm at work, people will be having a bad day. They'll be cursing, they'll be screaming, why does this have to happen? Why does that have to happen? And one day a woman said to me, she goes, Rich, why are you always smiling? And I turned to her and I said, as long as there's not a plane flying into this building, you're having a great day.
Alan Mann still lives in New York with his family. The events of that day left him with a fear of heights, but an added resilience.
I would say the most important thing that I learned that day, whatever happens to you, don't give up. Just don't give up, because you never know how you'll get out of a situation that might look bad, but you just can't give up, because life's too precious.
Only 3 people escaped from the 84th floor, and Brian Clark was one of them. After the impact, nobody from a higher floor got out. Today, he's making his first visit to the 9/11 Memorial, built in the footprints of the Twin Towers. He's come to pay his respects to the 61 men and women from Euro brokers who died. Among those remembered here is Jose Marrero, the Euro broker's security guard who passed Brian on the stairs as he went up to help his colleagues.
Everybody loved Jose, and he'd done the ultimate thing. He's a great example to me of the goodness in humankind, and I think it's more prevalent than we all realize. People like Jose are everywhere. A lot of people did a lot of great things that day, and will do so in the future. There are more good people than bad people, in my mind.
Among those good people was Brian himself, the man who risked his own life to save a stranger, Stanley Premnath.
I owe Brian everything, including my life. We don't have money, but whatever I have, if Brian chooses to have this clothes that I have here, it's all his. If Brian wants my wallet now, he can have it all. I owe Brian everything. Had it not been for this good Samaritan, I would not have lived. But I owe that man my life. And he knows this. I've told him that. Oh, Stan, come on. Gracious as he is. Come on, Stan, you don't owe me anything. I did what I had to do. No, sir. I owe you my life.